Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is sad. And we're basically just talking about the election more. This is not what I was hoping for, what many people were hoping for, which is kind of this prolonged, stalled scenario that ends up going to the courts. And, where there's just a whole bunch of shenanigans and chicanery taking place in several different swing states. It's like just insane. And the criticism is true that this is kind of an abomination how primitive our election system is in 2020, right? All of this should be on the blockchain. All of it should be immediately registered and transparent and accessible by anyone to audit. And obviously not all of the information would be present, but anybody could verify any single vote, and data patterns could be analyzed to see if there was any fraud taking place, such as if 193,000 ballots were all submitted at once, and all 193,000 of them, literally 100%, were votes for Biden, and not a single one was for Trump. That would really enable us to discern fraud when it was taking place, because that is mathematically impossible. Even in places that are heavily for Biden, such as California, there's always individuals, even if it's only one, who are on the other side, such as myself, at least in the Californian example. And now I'm wondering if I should have just kept my address in Nevada, because it is literally 8,000 is nothing. Literally, Reno is like 400,000 people. Like a neighborhood in part of Reno, and one little aspect where I grew up, with a mile around my high school, has 8,000 people at least. But I guess there's supposed to be a press conference. I think it might even be taking place right now. Essentially saying in Las Vegas that they will be filing a voter fraud lawsuit for at least 10,000 people who don't actually live in Nevada who voted in the election. And so essentially they are challenging that, because that, if that's true, which it very possibly is, then that would essentially, that's greater than the discrepancy of 8,000 votes right now. And so we'll see. If Trump loses both Arizona and Nevada, even if he wins Pennsylvania, Georgia, and South Carolina, Biden will still win the election. So it comes down to Arizona and or Nevada. If Trump wins either one, he wins the election, assuming that Pennsylvania, Georgia, and South Carolina are called for Trump, which I would say they probably will be. It's just amazing that they can call, the margin for calling it for Biden is so small, but the threshold that Trump has to overcome is just monolithic. They have to wait until 100% of the votes are counted, even if he's leading by hundreds of thousands of votes, such as Pennsylvania. But, even Fox News will call Arizona for Biden, early in the night, with, hardly any of the votes counted, relatively speaking to the others which were called. It is just really astounding to see the blatant hypocrisy and all of the media shenanigans on parade. And, that's really half of the sad aspect of, that we have such a fraudulent system and so many people willing to engage in fraud because, they don't actually have any intrinsic ethics, and they don't believe in any, cosmic structure of responsibility. And so basically anything goes in material land and in that atheist communist mindset. And again, people don't have to actually be Marxists to just be kind of a neo-Marxist. You just have to basically have your brain hijacked by the media and feel all these things that don't actually exist. And that will itself cause you to be in alignment with their program, right? If you feel that LGBTQs and racial minorities are just being attacked and beaten and killed by white racist Trump supporters all around the country, you are hallucinating, because that isn't happening. It hasn't happened at all over the last 4 years. The Proud Boys, which are so reviled by the left, is itself a multiracial, gay supporting, kind of new right outfit, and they basically only came to prominence by going and protecting, people at the free speech rallies. And then when Antifa attacked them, they, laid some Antifa out, and it made some really great YouTube videos. And but basically that is supporting violence, and even if it's just reacting to violence and responding. But the rules, it's rules for thee and not for me. It's always basically containing the actual narratives that are in support of freedom and liberty and sovereignty, and things that it's like this channel is, and channels like this one, we're just placed in this box where no one gets to hear what we say, and then they amplify the most vile and hateful voices, and we get called hateful and vile when we're just trying to live our lives and adhere to the structure of this country when it was founded. Of course, there's some things that are different, and there's always room for improvement, but in general, again, the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment, reserving the powers to the local and the county and the state governments that are not directly ascribed to the federal government. It's a better way of doing things. Again, until all people are angels, or at least we have some common, understanding on a deep spiritual philosophical basis, there has to be conflict resolution mechanisms. That is the function of government primarily, and why the judiciary, as I've been talking about, is very important. And to have it be as much as possible honest and ethical and adhering to the original intent of the Constitution, and not their, wide latitude interpretation of the meaning of these words. Especially, again, when the communists, they will just deconstruct the meaning of words until anything means anything, right? It's the whole science of deception at a certain level, and certain classes of people are very good at it because they've been doing it for a long time. They're professional grifters, if you will, and it takes a population that is generally enlightened to transcend it, because otherwise it is only an exploitation, a hack into the psychological structure of the human species, and taking advantage of what they know about themselves, because they know the exploit, the weakness and points of exploitation in others. And so, it's sad. It's sad that we have so many people who are willing to be those people, of those professional grifters, and they're sad that there's lots of people who actually buy the lies and believe the media narratives, and and just lap it up. The people who would actually vote for Biden are these people. I mean, again, many of them are otherwise very intelligent people, and they just live in this artificial reality. Some part of their world is just completely unmoored from any sort of natural foundation, and it's this program. It's the best analogy of what it is. It is just basically like the NPC, right? Their responses are being programmed and scripted ahead of time, and so that is really, very alarming, especially when they make, these pushes toward controlling society along these lines. The whole COVID push is quite clearly, a fabricated pretense that was, probably deliberate release. I mean, there's too many different aspects that point to it being a deliberate release in order to set up this whole pretense of 2020, the lockdown, and also to get the mass mail-in ballots, which obviously have been necessary for the fraud, as Trump has been calling out the whole time. But, it still appears to have come to pass, and we will see whether or not the Supreme Court plays a meaningful role in resolving it. But in my opinion, to some degree, it probably will. But Trump has to legitimately win the vote in either Arizona or Nevada in order to come out ahead. And it's very possible that, they could be successful in their fraud, and or that Biden genuinely won Arizona unbelievably. Like, Arizona is like one of the most gun-friendly states in the entire nation. Like, I have my concealed carry permit in Arizona. I don't even live there. That's how easy it is to get it. I mean, I guess they had, again, higher turnout for the cannabis measure, but the idea that Arizona would vote for Biden, again, we were just there, and there were so many Trump signs, it was insane. There were also a lot of other signs, there were signs for Biden and for Democrats. Sometimes even neighbors right next to each other would have, one pro-Trump sign and one anti-Trump sign. It's pretty funny. Arizona is all about their political signs. And, it's just hard for me to believe that Arizona would actually go for Biden. And it's hard for me to believe that my home state of Nevada would actually go for Biden. I mean, good God, we used to be a proud redneck state and, basically have some sense to us. But I think it's just all the influx from California, all these hipsters, all these, kind of Vegas people, which are kind of just, degenerate people in many ways. And so, not to talk too much shit on Vegas, but, it's literally in the middle of the desert. Reno is at least connected to the water and the trees, and there's resources. Like Vegas is, like most of Nevada is a straight up desert. It's just a high altitude desert. And, there were some great memes. It was like, y'all are rushing the fuck out of Nevada right now. We're 50th in education. We can't count. Give us a minute. And then it's like, America, they said we can't be seated until the whole party is present. Are you close by? And there's a picture of Nevada. It's just this guy who's just completely wasted, just waking up in bed and just like rubbing his face. It's like, yep. I mean, they haven't even updated their numbers since like election night. It's pretty pathetic, but we'll see. I mean, hypothetically, Arizona and Nevada could go for Trump, but if just one of them goes, then we will see a second term of President Trump. But it's so close, and again, with all the legal challenges, it's going to take some time before this thing is resolved. And I'm just praying and having faith that everything will be fine. And again, my happiness is not based in whether or not Trump wins. I would be very disappointed, again, if Arizona and or Nevada couldn't muster up the will to make it over the finish line. But ultimately, my life is going to be very good and on a successful path in any case. And so I try and just focus on that. Even if there's a Biden presidency, they did not have their blue wave. The Senate has been held. The House Democratic majority has been whittled down to a very slim margin, meaning that if there's even a few defectors on any particular legislation, anything that requires a simple majority at least, it's much more likely that things can be passed. I think that's a good recipe also for cannabis legalization at a federal level. So we'll see about that. Again, Mitch McConnell is not very friendly to cannabis, but he was the architect of the hemp CBD process. That only happened because, he's from Kentucky, and Kentucky historically has loved their hemp. And so yeah, we'll see what happens. I still have love for people who vote for Biden. I just have been very disappointed in the mentality that leads to that decision. I'm sad that most people, that many people can't see the positive aspect of Trump and what he has brought to this country, which is an excitement and a proud aspect that was fading away in this multicultural, nihilist postmodern, garbage. And it's about more than just policies. It's about more than just taxes in the monetary system. It's about us having the mentality that we need to go forward and solve those problems and others. There's lots of other problems besides those. Again, if there's a mass climate catastrophe, within the next, 10 to 20 years, and it's prolonged over decades, I mean, wouldn't it have seemed, probably a good idea to run the credit card up as long as we were investing it in new kind of structures that would help us adapt? I'm not an anarchist anymore. I also am not necessarily a statist, but again, the amount of force that is necessary and the amount of taxation that is necessary and just is only what is required to prevent greater crimes, greater transgressions of morality from occurring. right? Because it should not be accepted as necessary to constantly fund massive social programs. There should always be a financial analysis on everything, but at a certain point, the argument, ironically, is valid that things like roads, things like plumbing, things like electricity, there needs to be a coordinated structure, and it doesn't necessarily all need to be a state monopoly, but there needs to be some sort of community control over things. Because again, the more diverse that we become is the more that we're diverse in just, religion and skin color and nationality. It's diversity of different interests. And when interests aren't aligned, then you have a massive potential for conflict. And so, by necessity, the state grows when you import lots of people that are going to have divergent interests, that right in next to one another, because they won't be their brother's keeper as much as if they did have aligned interests. And again, if we can, almost test people for how much they love America before they come to this country, I think that's less draconian than what will be affected regardless if we don't put some sort of qualifiers and limits on that, because we don't have the potential to assimilate people when they come by the millions, right? They form their own communities, and then they just try and essentially seize power for their own little clique, and it's not healthy, right? Everything gets projected onto the white man, but it's really just the darkness that is within everyone, and I just, are there evil white people? Absolutely, basically do I have, the darkness in me that I have to battle? It's like, yes, but the difference is, between, I guess, people like ourselves and those who basically just want to take from others in a sense of envy and righteous victimhood, is that basically I'm willing to be like, I'm willing to take care of people. Like, I don't want it to be all about just me, but for them, it really is. It's just all about them, and it's always with the mask of, it's about other people, but, it's a narcissism and a mental darkness that drives it, and again, to me, that is sad, and we're trying to resolve it. But I think that in order to resolve it, people have to return to creation. They have to return to that connection with the natural world and the spirits that indwell, and the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit that indwells everything. Because we're only in, as crazy as 2020 is, when we get into the actual climate change, which has nothing to do with carbon dioxide and is all about solar cycles and different galactic, energetic densities, it is going to be far crazier than it is now. Things as crazy as they are not even close to where they will be once we get into the massive climate shifts, because historically that is associated with, the collapse of empires, war, and lots of other things. So the more that we can not just become sovereign on ourselves, but create businesses and systems that can bring that sustainability and sovereignty, resource sovereignty to people around the world, that is really what is going to be needed. We need to use our ingenuity to make the real shift happen. They're all just assuming that everything's going to be warming, right? It couldn't possibly get colder, right? That's just unfathomable. It's just always assumed that everything's going to get warmer, and they cook the data. It's the same thing with the polls. They're lying to themselves, and it doesn't hurt anyone but themselves. And those who believe it. It doesn't hurt the people who don't believe it. The people who are using fossil fuels without feeling guilty about it, they are in the right. You don't need to feel guilty about it. We should keep our air clean. We should invent new technologies and be efficient with our resources. But there's no reason to be like guilty about using fossil fuels, like, or consumables, as far as consumer products. But again, because recycling, it doesn't actually, get recycled the way that people think it does. It mainly just gets shipped to China, and then the Chinese just put it in a landfill anyway. there's ways that we can be resource sovereign at a very economic cost, and we can bring industry back to this country. And there's things that can be done at the political level. There absolutely are, but ultimately it's still up to us. And that's why, again, despite being called a Trump acolyte and trying to pigeonhole me just because of my support of a strong leader for our country, all I can say is that, basically I respect people's efforts, man, and I understand that people are flawed. And most people spend so much time complaining and philosophizing and just opining about reality and other people's actions that they forget that, it's the armchair quarterback syndrome of just, nobody reaches up toward the perfect standard. But, the perfect standard is, in truth, in action. And in that fractal resonance with the creator of the universe. And I see that in Trump. I hear that in Trump. His voice is the voice of a genuine person. Again, it might bend the story some to suit kind of the audience and the narrative, but it's not a malicious lie like the left lies. The left lies maliciously about huge things. Trump will just fib about little things. And not even fib, because he's just speaking casually. He's speaking as all of us speak. I mean, as much as I, claim to know, as much as my memory, most of the time serves me, there's still plenty of things that, I'll speak in error just because that's the nature of reality. It's all just kind of an imperfect, just simulacra of the actual truth. And the more that we can align our communication and our actions with the genuine truth, the metaphysical truth beyond language, beyond even mathematics, and just in relations, then, we will be more effective in the world, as I've said in a lot of the videos over the course of this year. And as we come to the close of the year, I just want people to remember that there is so much opportunity and there is more wealth in the world than there has ever been in the history of the world. And, except for maybe, I don't know what things were like in Atlantis and Hyperborea, but we literally have the potential to do anything with the technologies that are coming to the fore. And we can do it by just using agricultural substrates. We don't need to use rare earth minerals. We don't need to use these elements in the earth. We will use them, but we will use them much more efficiently. And thus we will eliminate many of the main resource constraints that, most of the population control advocates have always used as their red herring and boogeyman to avoid. We will eliminate the caps on population. This planet can support 100 billion. At least, basically, if we were to actually use space effectively and resources, in an infinite resource paradigm of agriculture gone hyperbolic by knowledge of energy and biology and agriculture, just synthesis of making new materials, conductors, superconductors, and super strong carbon ring structures. That will be able to power the century to come and, everything that comes after that, which we will leave to our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, just as we are doing for our great-grandparents as they fade away from this world. We are taking the reins, and I guess it's their grandparents now. I'm grateful that I still have my grandma alive, and we were down in Arizona visiting Space Panthers grandma, who is 90, and both my grandma and her grandma, their husbands, our grandpas, passed earlier in the year. It's just almost like, again, they knew 2020 is going to be a doozy, and I think it's time. I'm just going to check out and pass on, and but it's good for people to live a good life. It's good for them to be released from suffering, and it is not a tragedy for a person to die full of love and family in their later years. It is a tragedy when people live without love and live only with that sense of lack and victimhood and hate and envy and just that bile and disregard for the good that is in mankind, because in their own inaction, in their own shadow, they have failed to live up to the standard, and they blame everyone else for it. And so that's my video today, but do not be sad, for we are the light and they are the reft, and we will prevail always. Anyways, take it easy. Peace.
Ah.